So for those of you who look at the show on a regular, you are part of the entire experience. You've recognized that we are staying on the story concerning the nation's economy, concerning the potential gas increase, concerning supply chain issues, so that we can understand and really prepare ourselves in case worse comes to worse. Because for most of us consumers, as we step into the grocery, we step into the stores, you recognize little by little things are going up. You're seeing the impact on the bill. And for our friends, our families, all those who stay in touch with those who live in the US, they are also going through some major increases by the pump. People bawling for mercy outside there. And could we also be going down that road? That is the question. To really continue this conversation, advance this conversation, I welcome economist Marla Dukaran on the program this morning. Marla, great to have you to give us some perspective this Friday morning. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jason. Good morning, and good morning to all the viewers in Trinidad and Tobago.
Marla, it seems like it's a perfect storm brewing. Obviously, with the situation out in Europe, the Ukraine-Russia scenario, COVID-19, supply chain issues, our stalled operations with gas, the production is not where it used to be. How do we brace ourselves? How do we prepare for this potential tumultuous time that seems to be around the corner?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, how do you prepare? I think that for the most part, most of us in this region, as governments and even as individuals, we were caught quite unprepared, right, for the pandemic, and then now for the escalation in commodity prices globally. It's difficult to have seen this coming, if not impossible, and so we've largely caught unprepared. That notwithstanding, of course, everybody has to deal with this as best as they can. I mean, I'm speaking to you from Barbados today, where the Prime Minister spoke for almost 4 hours on Monday, delivering the budget. And she discussed ways in which she intends to shield the population of Barbados from these effects of rising commodity prices, granted that we've been struggling as an economy for more than 13 years now. In Trinidad, we're in a much more fortunate situation where the economy really has not been struggling for as long as Barbados has. However, I would say that Trinidad and Tobago was equally unprepared. We're seeing a situation where foreign exchange reserves are declining steadily, and that's based on several factors, but not the least of which is declining exports. So oil and gas production has been declining steadily. Gas for the past maybe 8 to 10 years, and oil for decades. And so that's put us in a position where we have to be very careful how we spend our money now. And the Prime Minister spoke at length about the possible reduction of the fuel subsidy and why that's important now.
I always make the point, and you would have said it there just now in your intro, where Barbados, so that's our Caribbean neighbor up north, Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, all our neighbors, they would have, over the years, found ways to adjust and to maneuver within the economic space. We would have always had that extra buffer, subsidies, and we more or less had a particular lifestyle. And I think it's the reality that we have to switch up and have a cultural shift in how we eat, how we spend. I think that obviously might be one of the, that might be the new normal going forward, in Trinidad at least, and Tobago. Can't forget Tobago, of course. What say you concerning that? You think that is a feasible plan to really, step into this time of unknown, economic unknown?
Okay, to answer that question, I just want to step back a bit. And you're right. Trinidad and Tobago has been blessed with natural resources to the extent that many of the islands in the Caribbean have not. What did we do with those resources? We gave tremendous transfers and subsidies. Apart from Montserrat, which is a whole different constitutional arrangement. It's an overseas territory to the United Kingdom, and they have a very unusual arrangement. But apart from Montserrat, we in Trinidad and Tobago have the highest levels of transfers and subsidies in this entire region. And what the government had done for generations, probably since the 1970s, is basically utilize the revenue that it earns from the oil and gas sector and distribute it to the population via subsidies on electricity, fuel, which is at the pump, water. And I just want to quote here from the most recent IMF report. It said that, and this of course is an independent view, it says rationalizing existing subsidies on fuel, electricity, and water, which disproportionately benefit the well-off population and encourage overconsumption, is a welcome reform that they're saying that Trinidad and Tobago needs. I found data that said that since 1997, we have spent $39 billion on subsidy, on the fuel subsidy alone, which could have bought us more than one rapid rail system. So we have basically wasted this money. And so you're talking about how do we adjust? The point is, if we had not overconsumed, if we had not wasted some of these resources that we had on overspending and spending on the wrong things, we would not have had the huge adjustment to make now that other islands have never had to make, because they never gave away this kind of level of subsidies. Like I said, the largest in the region. So it's unfortunate that at a time when the world is going through various shocks and we are being faced with these massive increases in commodity prices, that we now have to face this other shock of the government unwinding a situation that should have never have happened in the first place.
Interesting point. I never looked at it from that angle. Most interesting point there. How does the business class, the business sector in Trinidad and Tobago pivot? Many would have had to take their operations online. Many had to readjust. Many had to literally change their business model. If you had to talk with a Trinbagonian businessman or businesswoman this morning, what would be your advice?
Well, it depends on the business. If you're an importer or if you're a producer, it would be a bit different. But I also just wanted to add that in case people don't understand and don't really see it this way, I just want to share my own view that in addition to the subsidies on fuel, electricity, and water, the government of Trinidad and Tobago also subsidizes US dollars. We have an overvalued currency that is as much as 20% overvalued, according to the IMF. When you look at the formal exchange rate, about 6.8 versus the informal or parallel exchange rate on the black market, which is anywhere upwards of 750, you know that the government is accepting less with US dollars than it could get at a market rate. So we continue to subsidize. And so the business communities who are exporters are suffering as a result of not being able to access enough foreign exchange to buy the inputs to produce whatever they manufacture. And then also that overvalued currency means that imports are being subsidized because US dollars are being subsidized and exports are being penalized. And that's a perverse situation that also needs to be addressed if we're talking about subsidies. I think that Trinidad and Tobago has grown too accustomed to subsidies on almost everything. And it's sad that the government has waited till there already is a crisis, not of our making, to now have to unravel these subsidies. What we should have been doing is when things are good, we save more, and when things are lean, in lean times, we draw on those savings. Instead, what we did is we engaged in pro-cyclical fiscal policy, meaning that the more you have, the more you spend, and then when you have less, you try to find ways to spend less, which is just not how you manage even your own personal affairs, let alone the affairs of a country.
Interesting, because a word comes to mind all the time, and I think that, it's one that's even hard to swallow and hard to accept, but we would have, well, at least from my experience, gone about things with a sense of entitlement. And now that we recognize the reality of the day, is that it's getting a bit tougher. It's going to be really hard for many to adjust. It's going to be really tough. There is the suggestion that we should even look at simple things like, well, a diet is not a simple thing, but the basics like your diet, one should, adjust, how much times to go out and eat and cook at home and go back to the organic food. I mean, there are so many different suggestions.
Jason, basically we have to learn to live sustainably.
Yeah.
And once you subsidize something, you encourage overconsumption.
Yeah.
And living sustainably means that you do not overconsume.
Yeah.
The government should never have been subsidizing these things to the extent that we do. And it's unfortunate that, like I said, now that people need support is when the government is having no choice but to pull that support away because they simply cannot afford it. The Prime Minister spoke and said that the government will be bankrupt if we continue to subsidize to these levels, about $3 billion a year in fuel subsidy. The thing is, the government is already bankrupt. The government is already borrowing to pay interest on its existing debt. The government is already not paying its VAT refunds to people who are expecting and waiting on VAT refunds for years. That is a bankrupt government. And so now they have to cut back on something that they should never have been giving in the first place. And I don't mean to say this government, it has happened for decades, okay? So successive governments have engaged in irresponsible fiscal management in this country, and it's unfortunate and unfair now that the population of Trinidad and Tobago have to be hit with this just when the international commodity prices are high. But this is what happens when you do not pressure your government to manage its affairs responsibly, and all we want to do is say, what do I get? And what do I earn from this government? What is this government going to give me in its next budget? What is this government going to give me in their manifesto? That's not how we should be thinking. We should be thinking about long-term sustainability, and we have to start thinking about that now.
Marla, trust me, you have been able to strike a chord this morning. Thank you so much for the perspective. I hope that we could chit-chat in the future soon, and I wish you all the best. Thanks again this morning for coming forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason.
That's right. Most interesting perspective there from Marla Dukaran, economist. We have been mismanaging for many years. And listen, that's not a new concept. A lot of folks who understand economics, they would have said the same over many years. It's really a chance for us now to adjust and to maneuver into this new space responsibly, with financial responsibility. We want to get some details from the NLCB Fontclair Steel Orchestra. Big anniversary celebrations around the corner. Details after the break.